Susie Q. Oh, Susie Q, baby, I love you. Susie Q.
I'm Kevin Price. You're listening to The Price of Business. I'm getting an opportunity to talk to my good friend Tony Powers, radio personality, and love to have him on the program. And you can learn more about him at italkus.com. We're talking about what's happening on the business, the news, the political front. Not a whole lot of business talk these days, but a lot of stuff happening in business. You know, they had the last unemployment figures that came out let out I would say a lot of wind out of liberal cells who thought that the economy had made a churn. The reality was is the numbers showed once again something we've seen really more often than not over the last several years of the Obama administration, anemic numbers when it comes to job growth. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think the number that you really need to look at, when we talk about employment and unemployment, and of course they say that unemployment's now at 7.4%, but you really have to look at the job participation rate in the country. It's now dropped to the lowest level, I think, since the Great Depression.
Isn't it like 65%?
So you have fewer people in the country actually working because so many people have just given up looking for work, and they don't count them.
Tony, isn't it only like 65 or 70% participation now?
Actually, I think we're down at about 63.5%.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, and we haven't seen anything like this. And people think it's got something to do with the baby boomers. Yeah, it got something to do with retiring. They're not retiring; they just given up. They've pulled up the white flag.
Well, you're exactly right. They are throwing up the white flag. People are just giving up looking for work, and especially, you have two segments. If you look at the younger people, they are getting out of college, and they've got huge college debt for their student loans. They can't find jobs in their field, and they're having a hard time finding jobs, and many of them are giving up and finding part-time work. And then you have the people who are older, who are giving up and trying to, in many cases, getting on disability, and they've given up, and they've just dropped out of the job market.
Yeah, if you listen to these groups like Generation Opportunity, and it's so funny that the younger generation comes out in full mass with their going to college, they're getting their bachelor's degrees in business, and at one point, not too many years ago, were credible degrees so they could get viable jobs. They vote for Barack Obama in mass, and of course, they're working at Starbucks if they're lucky. Their generation's at 16.2% unemployment, according to Generation Opportunity, which is a very credible organization that monitors youth unemployment. Talk about that.
Well, yeah, and that's a sad thing is that these young people, they go to college, they're getting, I call it indoctrination, not an education. They're told what to think instead of how to think. And unfortunately, they've bought into this whole idea of collectivism, but it's not working, and they're not working. And because of that, you would think they would vote in their own self-interest, but it seems like they're going along with this whole socialist idea. I mean, if you look, if you ask the question, is socialism a good thing? Many of them think it is.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a direct result of government schools. Our side, the right. The right is really playing in kind of a foolish game. We've made a churn culturally. I don't know if we're ever going to be able to fix it, Tony, because of the fact that our problems today aren't just electoral problems. They're more systemic than that, and that includes culture, that includes education big time. Government schools, where the wolves are teaching the sheep what the wolves are allowed to do, and we wonder why we're giving up our liberties every single day. News is dominated by the left, which is why I created U.S. Daily Review, and you've created a national radio network. We have got to realize that our problems are more systemic than merely electoral.
Oh, exactly. I mean, if you look at how our kids are being educated today, and even yesterday when Obama lost the vote on the gun control bill, he and Biden said, well, we're not going to give up. We'll be back, basically is what they were saying, because they know that they're raising another generation in government schools, again, that are being indoctrinated and not educated. And like I said, they're being told what to think instead of how to think. And unfortunately, these young people have bought into that. And I see a bleak future if we don't get away from these government schools and start letting the money follow the children and let parents make choice in the schools that their children attend. I don't see good things happening in the future.
You and me both. I'm very worried about the future. Again, the future's in the hands of public schools. Think about that, Tony. Our future's in the hands of public schools, and they've made it perfectly clear where they stand on issues of liberty, on issues of independence and free enterprise. They despise those institutions. They're teaching your children to despise them, too. You know, and people want to send their kids to private schools. Unfortunately, the vast majority of private schools, when they sit across the table from you, and you're about to write checks for thousands and thousands of dollars to send your kids to those schools, oh, by the way, we have the same accreditation as the public schools have. That should frighten you. You know, we need to really be looking more seriously at homeschooling and private institutions creating facilitation centers to help people homeschool, to bring in independent curriculum that challenges the government status quo curriculum so that we can raise independent-minded thinking individuals rather than the sheeple that we're raising today.
Well, until parents start raising enough hell and they start calling their congressmen and their senators and insisting that we actually reform the public school systems, do away with the Department of Education, bring back local schools so that your local school board and the parents in that local community actually control the schools, and you take all that money that we're sending to the federal government and let that money go to follow the child and create competition in our school system where schools have to compete with each other for those dollars. And believe me, those dollars are enough that we spend so much on per student that we could send every child in this country to one of the best private schools in this country for what we're spending on public education.
Yeah.
And we need to change that.
So, you know, and I like that and how it sounds, you know, but I always worry about our good friends like at Hillsdale College, which you will know. Hillsdale is one of the few purveyors of liberty and higher learning in the country. You know, they won't take a penny of federal money because they don't want the control implicit in that federal money. Now, of course, you're talking about state money and all these things, but, you know, I can't find situations where the government doesn't underwrite it and then they ultimately control it.
Well, exactly right. That's why the money really needs to stay locally. It shouldn't even be going to the states. It should be local, and the money should be then spent on the way the parents see fit to spend it. And that should be their choice, and they should be able to send their children to the school of their choice. And that's one thing that the black community should be screaming about, because if you look at the situation now in the black community with the dropout rates, it is incredibly high, much higher than it is in the white community. And why? Because government schools are not teaching our children how to read and write. And again, they're indoctrinating them. They're not educating them.
Yeah, Tony Power is one of the brightest minds in radio, one of my favorite people to have on the show. He does a great show that I always love being a part of. We make sure we get on each other's show once a month, and I look forward to it every single month. Tony, again, how do we get more information about you?
I'm sorry?
How do we get more information about you, your website again?
Oh, you just go to italkus.com. It's real easy, italkus.com, and you can listen to us, stream us live all over the world, and you can find out about our station and the stuff we're doing here.
Want to make sure you check that out, italkus.com. Phenomenal network in the works, in the making, giving the message of liberty, a sensible approach, maybe uncommon sense in the current generation that we're living in, and helping people really understand that there are alternatives, that we can get out of the lockstep thinking that's so pervasive out there. It's shocking to me how people think in such lockstep in our culture today. Your thoughts?
Well, the culture is a serious problem, and we really need to change the culture. And I don't know if you've paid a lot of attention to Dr. Benjamin Carson, but he has been outspoken on this, and I really love that guy. And I think he's got a lot to say, and I hope everybody will go and look him up on Google if you haven't already. And go to YouTube and check out some of the speeches that he's made. I especially love the speech he made at the prayer breakfast where the president was right there, and he was talking about liberty in our culture and how we are just moving away from the culture that made our country great, and now we're, it's anything goes, and that anything goes, and the moral decay is causing our economic decay.
No question about it.
Direct correlation.
Yep, there's no question about it that our economics reflect our morality, and what we've got going on with mob rule. The founders gave us a republic, not a mobocracy, which is what America has become. What we are literally doing is that those who are allowed to vote today are stealing in mass trillions of dollars from future generations of people who cannot vote. That is what I call the oppression of the minority, at a scale that is unbelievable in history.
Oh, yes. And when you think about what we're doing to our children and our grandchildren, that is morally wrong. It's not just economically wrong, it's morally wrong. We are chaining and enslaving our children to massive amounts of debt. They already have their college loans they're going to have to pay back. And now they are going to be tied to $53,000 at this point each. That's their share of the federal debt.
There you go.
It's going to get a lot more.
Very sobering thought to end on. Tony Powers, italkus.com. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. When we come back, much more for you. You want to make sure you stay tuned to it right here on The Price of Business.